Hi there, it's Beth Stefaniak and my husband Gary, and we are talking today about a hot topic that I notice among a lot of Christian wives. They want their husbands to spiritually lead, but it's sort of a difficult thing to navigate. They're afraid of overstepping a boundary, and so today I wanted to kind of pick my hubby's brain on what he thinks, and of course it's in relation to our relationship, our marriage, so it may be different for you, but let's listen to what Gary has to say about those things. Years ago, I came to you. I kind of did something rather bold for a wife, but it's not bold for us because we talk about a lot of things, but I suggested to Gary that we pray together daily, that we make a commitment to that. And we had prayed before on a regular basis, but it was never a daily commitment. So tell me, Gary, how you felt back at that point when I came and I initiated something with you.
Well, first of all, you need to remember that my memory is not the greatest. It's been a while, and feelings aren't quite on my radar all the time, but I don't remember feeling negative about it. Obviously, you must have done it all right. But I have the advantage, we have the advantage, I'm okay with praying, so a lot of husbands aren't.
Yeah.
I'd say most husbands aren't.
Yeah.
Praying out loud at least.
Why do you think that's an issue for husbands?
Well, they're not used to it, and men aren't used to being intimate with God in that way more than most men anyway. So
yeah, and I think it's vulnerable for a couple, not just with God. I think it's really that's one of the powerful aspects of it, that it is that brings that vulnerability to the relationship. But I think it's really scary for both the husband and wife when they first start out praying together.
Sort of like starting out doing videotaping together, and how scary that is for a husband. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, at least we're
So
not videotaping
I probably
our prayers.
feel a lot like a husband that's afraid to pray.
Yeah,
Right
yeah,
now, so.
yeah. Well, what would you say to a wife who comes to you for counsel and her husband is not as far along spiritually as she is, and let's just say she wants him to begin to lead with devotionals on a regular basis, not even praying together daily, but just, she feels like the family needs to have a devotional. What would be your encouragement to her?
Well, first, don't assume that he's not engaging spiritually, because women and men typically engage differently. Mm-hmm. And it could be very easy to assume that he's not when he is. It's just different. Yeah. So give him a little bit of break there, that it might be that he is.
So maybe coming at it from an affirmation angle of she sees something that he's already doing and say, I know you're doing this.
Well, and if she does see something, that would be good to point out. And that would be helpful to sort of begin to create a safe space for conversation about it.
Yeah.
But for sure, don't nagging, or even if you're not nagging, if you're doing it well, it can still come across as nagging, because a husband can feel sort of inferior, feel insecure about it, because I feel like my wife doesn't think I'm great at this and I need to beef it up, and I don't know how to beef it up, and so it can be really weird. And so don't come across like, for instance, if there's any kind of issue, well, have you prayed about it? And sort of like you're assuming that they haven't, and so that already sets a negative tone to things. So
and I would add to that the wife needs to pray about whatever it is she wants to say to her husband ahead of time, so that her attitude is one of humbleness and flexibility, willing to let her husband lead instead of telling him how he should lead.
Yeah. A lot of times we don't, because our wives are doing it, so we just sort of sit back and let them.
Yeah, she may come with an idea of how she wants it done. Would you say that's maybe not?
Well, I'd say better than that would be to ask questions and just ask what a husband feels comfortable with in the marriage.
Yeah.
And there's also part of it that a spouse, either way, husband or wife, needs to just be really patient and trusting and prayerful, because you can't change your husband, can't change your wife. They're responsible for their own spirituality. And I do premarital counseling all the time, and see so many couples that get married and they don't really talk through things. They have really weird expectations that their husband's all of a sudden going to be some kind of spiritual
giant.
After they're married, and they don't. So they've already set themselves up for failure with the expectations, then trying to change him. So you can't. But I think 1 Peter 3. Talks about how the influence, without words, that a wife can have on a husband is powerful, and I think we underestimate what prayer can do.
Yeah.
And it's just like, for instance, in that passage, it talks about submitting. And if I came to you and said, I want to talk to you about how you can submit a little bit better in our marriage, that would be sort of an intimidating and not so positive kind of conversation. And that's sort of the way it would probably come across to a husband that's not used to that feels inferior. There's about spiritual leadership. So you got to be careful with. And like if I didn't feel like you were as submissive as you should be, which on occasion I may feel that way, rather than address it with you, address it with God. And use that same 1 Peter principle. I think men can do that too. It's not just for women, but I think we do underestimate the power of what God's influence can be through His Spirit without any words from us.
Yeah. Now, what if a wife comes to her husband and she's gotten sort of a barrier, a negative response from her husband? What would you think? And I know you can't say for her what she needs to do, but if it was me and I had gotten sort of a negative response, what would you tell me to what would be my next step in dealing with that?
Well, you're going to have to be patient, I think, because you or we're going to have to create some safe places to have conversations on lesser significant issues, where a husband can feel comfortable self-disclosing on things that aren't, so major, have experiences and a track record of that before that it gets deeper into more spiritual things. I mean, and that may take a long time.
Yeah.
Or that may never happen, and it may never come to the end that you'd like it to come to.
Yeah. I think sometimes wives are down to XYZ on ideas or how far they want to go with a spiritual discipline in their relationship with their husband, where their husband's at A, B, C, and you really need to adjust your expectations or it will sort of backfire on you.
And remember that it's so easy for a husband to feel inferior with spirituality. It's so
why do you think that is?
I mean, it's a pretty major part of life, and
big responsibility.
We ought to be better than we are. Most of us should be, and we're not. I mean, it's related to God, so that's a big piece. We can get away with cutting corners on some other areas, but you really can't. You can't get away with it. You'll pay the price.
Yeah.
But everything's redeemable, and even if things have been really bad and empty in that area, that it can improve.
Yeah.
But just with prayer and patience and letting go of some things, and just really trusting God. I mean, as well as I do. I mean, we're both more vocal, and we both express ourselves, and we have to pull back with each other and with others too.
Yeah.
What we'd like to say to people, we don't and shouldn't. We shouldn't, but there are other husbands and wives that ought to be more vocal.
Yeah.
But we ought to tone it down a little bit.
Yeah. So I appreciate you taking the time, being vulnerable about this topic.
You're so welcome.
And I hope it's been helpful to you and given you some food for thought, the biggest thing is just being patient and respectful, I feel like. So I think Gary might agree with that too. Thanks so much for joining us for another Pick Your Hubby's Brain.